Once upon a time in the quiet town of Agura lived a woman who did something that no one else had ever done. Her name was Abony, and she changed her baby's name every single day. On Monday, the baby was Ayami. By Tuesday, she became Ola. On Wednesday, she was more Remy. And by Thursday, Abony was calling her Aua. No one knew why she did what she did, not even her husband Kola, who thought that something was definitely wrong with his wife. The neighbors whispered amongst themselves, wondering if the child was cursed or was still born by a lunatic mother. 7 names in 7 days was so ridiculous, it became the talk of the town as everyone had something to say. Abi must be sick in the head, one of them said, whilst another believed that the child was not hers. How can a woman be so indecisive on the name to give to her child? Does she know what this would do to the child when she grows up? They said amongst themselves, shrugging as Abony walked past them with her baby strapped to her back. She knew they were talking about her, but Abony did not care. She went about her business, ignoring all their whispers and gossip. Her husband Ka could no longer take the embarrassment. "You must stop this nonsense, Abony," he snapped. "How can our daughter have a different name every day? What do people think? What will she even call herself when she grows?" he asked. Abony informed him that time will tell. "Our daughter will know who she is when the time is right," she replied as she folded her baby blanket on the bed. Kola was still not convinced with the answer. "Stop hiding behind mystery and tell me what is going on," he demanded, but she remained silent. Ka was so frustrated and angry he stormed out of the house. He could not understand why his wife Abony was behaving like a mad woman. As he walked out angrily, his phone rang and his mother asked why he sounded so angry. "Mama, is it not Abony? She has started again, changing the baby's name every single day. Today she called her Dessa. Yesterday it was Mori. Who knows what foolishness she will say tomorrow?" Mama Kola hissed and began to talk. "I warned you, Kola. I told you that girl is not normal. All this her quiet behavior and mysterious talk. What kind of mother changes her child's name like Rapper?" she asked. Kola rubbed his forehead in frustration. "Mom, I'm tired. People are laughing at me and it's not even funny. Then do something about it fast. Don't bring shame to me and your father by staying with that witch of a woman. Make sure you leave her now before she does something terrible to you," she said to her son, Kola, who stood there deep in thought. That night, Kola packed up his bags and left, leaving Abony alone with their daughter. Abony was so heartbroken. She knew this was going to happen, seeing that Ka's mother never liked her from the beginning. She loved Ka so much and believed that he would stand beside her even if the world decided to mock them. But love, she had come to realize, was not always enough, not when family pressure and shame knocked too loud at the door. Abony looked down at her daughter as tears began to pour down her eyes. She never imagined that her daughter would one day grow up without a father. But as fate would have it, she was now alone. She took care of her daughter, ignoring all the terrible things that people said and did to them. At a point, no one associated with them, and Abony lived alone with her daughter, who began to grow in the cold and hostile village. A few years later, when she turned 4, her mother tried to enroll her in a nearby school, but the school rejected the application. "She has no legal name," the headmistress said sharply as Abony looked up at her. "How can we register a child whose name changes every day? What do we write on her file? Today Ayami, tomorrow Desua. This is not a joke, madam." Abony pleaded, tried to explain that her daughter was special, that there was a reason for everything, but no one listened. She was sent away from the school gates, holding her confused daughter who could not help but ask why they were turned away. "Why are they angry, Mama? Did I do something wrong?" the little girl asked innocently as Abony forced a smile and said to her, "You didn't do anything wrong, my daughter. They just don't understand," she said as they both walked home. However, the rejection did not stop Abony. She began to teach her daughter at home, letters, numbers, stories. Every day was a new lesson. And as the girl grew, so did her strength. She learned quickly and spoke eloquently, far better than most children her age. By the time she was 6, she could read fluently, and even began to help her mother with the accounting from their small stall in the market. Still, people whispered and pointed fingers at her in mockery. They called her the name-changing witch, and parents warned their children to stay away from her. Ebony could not help but see how hurt her daughter was to see the other children playing together. She watched as her daughter sat by the window alone, watching as the other children laughed and played. So Ebony decided to do something about it. She made her daughter the most beautiful doll crafted from colorful materials. Ebony handed the doll over to her daughter, who could not hide her excitement. For the first time in years, Ebony could see how her daughter's face lit up at the sight of the doll. She told her daughter to name the doll, and her daughter, without thinking twice, named it Angela, which meant bringer of joy. From that day on, the little girl carried Angela everywhere. She spoke to her, played with her, and taught her all the things her mother had taught her. To anyone watching, it might have seemed odd, another sign that something wasn't right with the name-changing girl. But to Ebony's daughter, Angela was a friend when no one else cared to be. As the years went by, Ebony's daughter grew into an extremely beautiful young woman. She was now 18 and had no friends except Angela, the doll her mother made for her so many years ago. One day, Ebony's daughter went to the stream to fetch some water. As she was about carrying the pot of water on her head, she heard a loud scream coming from the forest. She followed the cry and met a pregnant woman who seemed to be in labor. She had just been bitten by a ravenous snake, and the poison was fast spreading. Ebony's daughter quickly found a cloth and tied it around the woman's leg to stop the poison from spreading. Before she knew what was happening, the woman pushed out a baby in front of her eyes. She sat there confused as the woman let out her last breath. Ebony's daughter held the newborn baby in her hand as she wondered what she was going to do. She looked around and found the strange woman's bag lying next to her lifeless body. So she took it home and met her mother, who asked her where the baby had come from. Ebony stood there and listened as her daughter explained everything that happened to her, how she had followed the scream, helped the woman in labor, and watched her die right there in the forest. "She didn't say anything, Mama. She didn't tell me her name. She just left her baby behind, and I didn't know what to do." Ebony took the baby from her daughter's arms, her experienced arms cradling the newborn with tenderness. She looked down at the infant's face, her eyes softening with a mix of sorrow and awe. Then she turned to her daughter and said, "We must find the child's family. The baby deserves to grow up knowing where she comes from." Her daughter nodded and handed over the bag the woman had left behind. Ebony opened it carefully, hoping for a clue. At the bottom of the worn-out bag, beneath a crumpled scarf and an old wrapper, she found a photograph. It was a picture of a man who they had never seen before. And Ebony wondered how they could find him. She searched the bag thoroughly but found nothing that could be of help. No name, no address, nothing. And Ebony had no idea how she would find him. She knew the villagers would be of no help, seeing how they avoided them like a plague. So Ebony decided to keep the baby in their home until they found the man whose face was in the picture. Days turned into weeks, but still there was no sign of the man in the photograph. Ebony often stared at the picture, hoping that something, anything, would stir her memory or lead her to someone who knew him. But Agura was a town where people minded their business, and Ebony's family had long been treated as outcasts. No one dared to speak to them, let alone help them. So Ebony and her daughter continued to care for the child. One day, Ebony decided that it was high time that the baby got a name. She told her daughter to pick a name for the baby. And without wasting any time, her daughter picked the name Archer. From the moment that she said the name Archer, Ebony's daughter felt a wave of happiness that she could not explain. It was as though the baby whispered the name in her ears. And the connection she felt with the baby in that moment was so deep and powerful. Her mother Ebony also noticed the connection. She could see the joy in her daughter's eyes, a stillness that hadn't been there before. Ebony was so grateful for the baby. At last, her daughter could have a friend who, although small, would not judge her or mock her the way the villagers had done all her life. For the first time in years, their house felt full. It was no longer just the two of them. It was now a home filled with soft baby cries, innocent giggles, and a kind of peace that made Ebony silently thank the heavens. Ebony rejoiced. Her neighbors wondered where the baby had come from. "I told you she's a witch," one of the neighbors said, revealing that she overheard some chants in Ebony's house the night before. "We can't live next to a witch. It's either she lives with her witch daughter or we drive her out ourselves." That was how the whisper became a meeting, and the meeting soon became a mob. By evening, a crowd had gathered outside Ebony's compound, their faces filled with suspicion, fear, and anger. Some carried sticks, whilst others held their Bibles and some bottles of anointing oil. They banged on her door repeatedly as Ebony walked out of the house slowly with her daughter by her side. She was holding the baby in her hands, and the villagers all opened their mouths in shock to see a baby in her arms. She looked the crowd in the eye, and for the first time in years, she did not flinch. "What have I done?" Ebony asked, her voice calm but firm. "Which one of you came to me with kindness? Which one offered me friendship? When my husband left, you laughed. When I taught my child alone, you mocked. And now, because I took in a child from the bushes, I am a witch?" Someone in the crowd replied her question, asking where the baby had come from and where her mother was. Ebony explained how her daughter came across the baby. But the villagers found it hard to believe. They requested to see where the baby's mother had died, and Ebony, alongside her daughter, took them to the forest where she was last seen. When they arrived at the scene, the strange woman's body was gone. All that remained were scattered leaves and a torn headscarf stained with dried blood. "Lies!" one of the villagers shouted. "She buried the woman herself after using her for rituals." "I told you!" another yelled angrily, pointing her accusing finger at Ebony. "This is why she changed her daughter's name every day, to practice her witchcraft." The angry mob chased them out of the village as Ebony ran off with her daughter and the newborn baby. They ran until their legs could no longer carry them. Night had fallen over the dusty road as Ebony stumbled forward, breathless and trembling, clutching the baby tightly to her chest while her daughter clung to her side, barefoot and weeping. They had no food, no belongings, and nowhere to go. In desperation, Ebony remembered her husband's mother's house in the neighboring village of Akatu. She hadn't been there since her wedding, but with no other options, she decided to take a chance. "Maybe," she whispered to her daughter, "maybe she'll have mercy." They arrived in the dead of night, hungry and covered in dust. Ebony knocked gently on the rusted gate, her voice weak as she called out, "Mama Cola, please." A light flickered inside, and moments later, the old woman opened the door. Her eyes fixated on Ebony with disgust. "You witch," she said. "What are you doing in my home?" "Mama, please," Ebony begged. "They chased us. They said I killed someone. I have nowhere else to go." Mama Cola's eyes fell on the baby in Ebony's arms. Her face twisted. "What bastard child is that? Another one you've bewitched? You bring this child and your mad daughter here to pollute my home." Ebony's daughter gasped, holding her tighter. "Please, Mama," Ebony said again, her knees buckling as she fell to the ground. "Just one night, I beg you." But the old woman spat on the floor. "If you don't leave now, I'll call the town boys and tell them you're a witch who steals children. I should have stopped Ka from marrying you. Now see the disgrace you've brought us." Ebony stood slowly, pale and shaking. "Don't ever come near my house again," Mama Cola warned, pointing to the road. "You and that daughter of yours, whose name changes like a chameleon, you can all die for all I care." She slammed the door in their faces, leaving them alone in the dark. Ebony stood frozen, the sound of the slammed door echoing in her ears. Her daughter held her wrapper, shivering as the night wind blew. The baby whimpered faintly, too young to understand the world that had turned its back on her. Ebony looked up at the sky, stars watching silently as tears filled her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Not again. She had cried enough tears to fill the village river. All she had now was survival. "Keep walking," she told her daughter when asked where they were going. "I don't know yet, my daughter. But wherever it is, I know it will be better than here." They walked under the cover of night for hours and came across an empty hut by the side of the forest. Ebony, seeing how exhausted her daughter was and that the baby had already fallen asleep, decided to lay low in the hut. It had nothing but dry leaves, broken wooden planks, and dust, but it felt like a palace because they were finally safe. Ebony laid Ariel down and watched her daughter curl up beside the baby, protectively wrapping her arms around her. Ebony leaned against the wall, whispering a soft prayer as her body gave in to exhaustion. They all slept for hours. When morning came, Ebony realized her daughter was gone. "Adutu!" she called out, then paused. That wasn't her name today. Ebony hadn't given her daughter a name that morning. Panic flooded her. She stepped out of the hut and searched frantically through the village, asking everyone if they had seen her daughter. But no one could help her because she didn't have a name to offer. For the first time, her daughter was nameless, and that terrified her. Returning to the hut in despair, Ebony found an old woman sitting outside. She apologized, explaining they didn't know anyone lived there and had only sought shelter. The old woman asked why she looked so sad, and Ebony told her everything: how they were accused of witchcraft, exiled, and how her daughter was now missing. She pleaded to be allowed to stay until her daughter returned. The woman agreed, saying, "You can stay as long as you want." Just then, baby Eric cried loudly. Ebony wondered what to feed her, and the old woman pointed to a pot. "There's some milk, heat it up for her." Ebony thanked her and rushed to prepare it. As she did, Eric wailed even louder, her tiny fists clenched, face soaked in tears. The old woman began to hum softly, trying to soothe her, but Eric's cries only grew. Ebony, alarmed, moved to lift the baby, but a sharp pain shot through her spine. Her vision blurred. She collapsed beside the crying child, unable to move or speak. The old woman's face twisted into a wicked smile. "You shouldn't have come here, Benny," she said, her voice now dark and venomous. "You brought her to me, the one I've searched for all these months." Years ago, this woman had murdered the reigning king and seized power, plotting to install her son on the throne. But when she learned the king's wife was pregnant, she panicked. That child was the true heir, so she hunted the queen, but prayers hid her. When the queen died in the forest, the old woman saw the baby in her dark mirror. But she couldn't trace the child, because another girl, with a name that changed daily, had taken her. Thousands of names confused the spirits. So the woman followed their trail, always one step behind. Now, the baby was finally in her grasp, and Ebony lay paralyzed by her spell. Ebony remembered the dream she had when pregnant, a vision of holding her grown daughter, dead in her arms, and a strange woman warning her, "Do not name her. Give her a name each day until the one who has been named is set free." Ebony obeyed without fully understanding. Now, as she watched the old woman raise a dagger over baby Eric, it all became clear. She had failed to name her daughter that day, and now they were vulnerable. Suddenly, the door burst open. Ebony's daughter stood there, barefoot and fierce-eyed, and behind her stood a tall man, his face identical to the one in the photograph Ebony found in the dead woman's bag. He was the queen's brother, long believed dead. Years ago, he had been attacked and buried in a shallow grave by the evil woman's son, but was saved and had lived in hiding ever since. When the queen died, he searched for her baby, eventually hearing about Ebony's daughter who changed names daily. Realizing the truth, he followed them in secret. That night, Ebony's daughter had woken to ease herself and found him outside. Recognizing his face from the photo, she listened as he told her the truth. Now, standing in the hut, the old woman snarled, "You again. Why don't you stay buried?" "Because truth doesn't lie," he replied. "And neither will my niece." Before she could strike, he lunged, forcing the dagger into her. She fell, her life slipping away, and the hut fell silent. Baby Eric stopped crying as Ebony sat up and embraced her daughter. "I'm happy you are okay," she whispered. "You are no longer nameless. Your name is Lua." It meant hope of God, and it carried the weight of every sacrifice, every tear. Her daughter's eyes welled up. "I love it," she whispered. The queen's brother took baby Eric into his arms. We must go, the kingdom awaits its true heir. When they arrived, the people were stunned to see him alive. He announced the lost princess had been found. Jubilation swept through the kingdom. The evil woman's son, caught trying to flee, was imprisoned. Ebony and her daughter were welcomed like queens. The brother declared, "This woman and her daughter preserved the crown that evil tried to destroy. They shall rule beside me until Princess Herrick comes of age." Back in Lagoda, the people who once mocked Ebony now wept in shame, including Mama Cola and Ka. They regretted how they treated her, seeing how life had rewarded her. As for little Eric, she thrived, playful, strong-willed, and prepared to one day become the greatest queen the kingdom had ever seen. The lesson from this story is that what the world mocks today, destiny may honor tomorrow. People may not understand your silence, your choices, or your struggle. But if your heart is pure, truth will find its voice in the end. Ebony was ridiculed, abandoned, and called mad, but her faith, sacrifice, and love protected not only her daughter but an entire kingdom. Never judge what you do not understand, for every name, every tear, and every step in the journey may be leading to something far greater than we can imagine.